Welcome back to Sister to Sister.
The camera's rolling. Oh my god. Assalamu alaikum, guys. So I'm Aysha.
And I'm Ameenah.
Podcast created for sisters with sisters in mind.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to another episode of Sister to Sister. I'm one of your hosts, Aysha Mercedes.
And I'm Ameenah.
Yes, we are back in the building with another fruitful discussion. This one, again, I would say trigger warning, guys, okay? Because we are talking about all things identity. There's a bit of, racism in there, or racial racism experience as well. And lots of different things around upbringing and knowing yourself, self-awareness, all that kind of good stuff.
And I think, it's a subject, when it comes to identity, it's a subject that we all struggle with at some point in our lives. Yeah. Whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, it's something that we all struggle with at some point through different times as well. So, things happen in your life that kind of like impact how you see yourself. And so we're going to go into this conversation and let's jump in the comments.
So it's just myself and Ameenah today. We are going to be talking about, primarily, we're talking about identity. So I guess the first kind of thinking point is, what does identity, when you hear like the word identity, what's the first thing that comes into your mind?
Well, if somebody asks me, what is my identity? I think obviously there's a few things there. So, I'm female, I'm black, I'm Muslim, I'm a mother, I'm a business owner. That's my identity.
So when I think of identity, I think automatically I think about race. And I go back to when I was maybe 10 years old, and it's a real trigger point for me because I feel that was at a point where I really, really struggled with my identity.
It's interesting that you said you think about race, because I don't. The first thing I think about literally is I'm a woman.
Do you? Yeah.
Like I'm a female.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that comes into my head. And then what comes next is I'm black.
That's interesting.
And then Muslim. And I know actually Islamically we're supposed to say Muslim first. But maybe because as a revert,
I think like
it's natural.
I think when I said the first thing, kind of meant the actual first thing, but for you, it's being a woman. So there must be something around being a woman that is kind of like that point of, it's a bit of free association, bit of therapy. But like when you first mention a word, like in not thinking about it, but just what comes into your head. And as I said, for me, the first actual thing is mixed race. And at that time, like I said, when I was 10 years old, I grew up with my mum because I didn't see much of my dad, because I've explained in previous episodes, my dad had quite severe mental health issues. And I feel like that aspect of my dad and not seeing him and growing up quite like with my white side, there was a point when I was around 10 years old that I did really want to be white, because I didn't have a connection with my father. And all of my family, apart from me and my brother, were white. And I was in Essex a lot. And I just felt different. Do you see what I mean? So I think that at that point, when someone says identity, I think about the struggles that I have had, because I've only been Muslim for 12 years, right? So it's like, I identify as a Muslim and a woman and this and that and the other. But ultimately, I was born a mixed race non-Muslim. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
And what that looked like for me was that, growing up when I was young, I didn't notice colour. My mum brought us up without recognising, the colour aspect. We was in a mixed environment. But as I started to get older and I started to see the differences between sort of black and white, even after that.
As you get older, you mean as you became an older child? Like
As I became an older child.
6, 7, 8, 9.
So like, so up until about 10, that's when it started to, like, race started to become something that I recognised in myself. Before that, I didn't recognise it. I was brought up so, like, almost sheltered, and almost like there was never any mention of it. And I was in.
So sorry to interrupt you, but at what point did you want to be white then? Start getting those feelings of wanting to be white.
It was probably, there was an incident with my dad, where I was with the black side of my family, like my Jamaican side of my family was at a party, and my dad just behaved quite erratic, ran onto the bouncy castle because I was messing around with some little boy, and
I've heard this story,
like after that, I don't know, like it was just so traumatizing. And I was scared of my dad, like at that point in time. I didn't want to be around him, and nobody comforted me, like in the family. I just didn't feel like they stopped him, but it just didn't feel connected. And then I'd spend a lot of time at my nan's and stuff like that. And I think it got to a point.
Nan's your mum's mum or your
mum? My mum's mum on my white side, and it just got to a point where I was coming to the end of like primary school, and. And it wasn't a conscious thing. It just was more about just wanting to fit in. I suppose you grow up, you're starting to become a teenager, you're an older child, and you're trying to look for somewhere to fit in. Well, I was anyway. And before that, like I said, there was no, I didn't know, it didn't even enter my mind. So I guess it was like a reality shock. Like I don't fit in here. Like, where do I fit in?
The first time I recognised that I was black was actually quite young.
Really?
Yeah, it was when I first started school.
Okay.
It was when I first started primary school, because I was literally one of the only black children in the school. And I spent most of my playtimes by myself. And I started to associate the fact that I was darker skinned than everyone else with the reason why they were all playing together and I wasn't included. You know, their hair was different. They were all the girls would be playing with their hair. They'd be doing things like making braids, you know, putting daisy chains in their hair and things like that. And I couldn't join in with that. And I was actually literally excluded and told that I couldn't join in. So I noticed it. I noticed it hugely.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? The difference between like your experience and noticing it despite growing up like one race, because obviously you didn't have the confusion like that I might have had around, am I white, am I black?
I had the confusion, but it was a different type of confusion.
But in that sense,
I had the confusion, and my confusion was more, why do I have to be black? Why do I have to be this colour? And you know what, there's a few things that impacted the way that I thought about myself as well. For example, there was this film called The Imitation of Life, and I watched that quite young. And if anyone knows about that film, it's literally about a mixed race girl who grows up with a black mother, but she grows up in the 1950s. And obviously them times, in America as well, and obviously in them times, racism was still very, very, very prolific. Like, you wouldn't see a black woman and a white man or vice versa walking down the road together without them getting some kind of hassle, some kind of attack, some kind of verbal abuse. So that film highlighted race for me in a huge way. And then I remember there was a point where I actually hated my nose the most. I hated my nose. I thought my nose was big, because all the girls at school had straight noses. You know, they were pretty. They were the prettiest girls, or they were considered the prettiest girls. And I just felt to myself that my nose was fat, and that was because everyone in my family referenced my nose as being not saying that my nose was big, but comparing it to my nan's and saying, "Oh, you've got your nan's nose." And when I looked at my nan, I just saw a big nose.
Big nose,
Astaghfirullah. But that's what I saw. And I thought, is that what my nose looks like? It looks big, because her nose doesn't look like all the little white girls at school. And from there, I wanted my nose to be straight. I wanted to be white. I wanted to have blonde hair. There was this film called Little Women, And I remember watching this film, again, another old school film, yeah. But I remember watching this film, and in the film, one of the sisters, I think she's the youngest sister, and they're all white, it's a white family, it's about a white family, all white women in the family. And the little girl, the youngest, I think her name was Amy, she had decided that her nose wasn't straight enough. And so in order for her to straighten her nose, she was going to put clothes pegs on her nose every night and go to sleep. So I'm watching this film and I'm saying to myself, she doesn't think her nose is straight. Her nose is straight and perfect.
Yes,
well, look at mine then. So what do you think I started doing? I started putting clothes pegs on my nose to make my nose straighter because I wanted to be pretty. And I think this is the thing about it as well. The human being naturally desires to be attractive. We naturally desire to be attractive and more attractive. This is why the beauty industry capitalizes on it every day.
But you know what? I do definitely feel that environment plays a massive part in it.
Definitely.
Because if you're brought up in an environment, especially when you're brought up with your dad not present for whatever reason, right? Your dad is your first love. Your dad is the person that looks at you and shows you that attention, that love, and makes you feel secure within yourself. But obviously if you go into schools and you have those experiences, it would have an impact, of course, right? It's going to have an impact on the way you see yourself. But if your foundation is quite strong and you've got a stable household, mum's, complimenting you, like I literally got to like 15, like people will look at me and think, oh, you're pretty, mashallah, I'm about this, that and the other. That's what people say to me. But when I got to 15, I got some attention, and I was surprised because I don't feel that anybody had actually ever said to me, you're beautiful.
That's how I felt.
Right? And, people might think, oh yeah, but mixed race, there's a lot of this kind of mixed race and black kind of understandings where black girls might look at mixed race girls and think they've got it easy in some way, or that, you're light skinned so you can fit in and get away. When you go to an all white school, you don't fit in, you're not white. You don't
fit in, yeah.
And I think that those kind of things, again, I don't necessarily think I was thinking as a teenager much about wanting to be white. I think I just had that moment at that age, and it was just because I loved my mum's family. They just looked after me so much, and the experiences that I had with my dad were just so negative that I just wanted to identify over there. And I just thought life would be easy, it would be better if I was white.
White, yeah.
Not maybe from I didn't think it maybe from a perspective of beauty, because nobody was looking, and I didn't feel like that in my environment because it was quite a mixed environment.
Now I can definitely relate to that as well, because I think even I didn't necessarily have that, my family's actually quite mixed. So I've got, white cousins who are, well, they appear white, but actually they're mixed race themselves because they're mixed with Asian and white, but they look white.
Clear,
so to most people, they would just assume they're white. They wouldn't know their mum's half Indian. So for me, I don't think it was so much the environment and the family, but it was more things that I was seeing on telly that would give me that impression that being white was easier. Looking in magazines, seeing other white families out, and then knowing that the household that I was coming from was not even knowing it, because as a child you don't think about it on that level, but the disruption that I was living in my house, there was never that balance of there was never enough of a balance of being happy for me to feel good about my environment. So that was what made me steer towards the idea that maybe it would be better if I was white. Do you get what I mean? So there was the beauty aspect, there was the family aspect, there was that was the whole identity. Do you know what I mean? Thinking about how would it be if I had a white brother and sister? You know what I mean?
I just can't believe that. I know that you've spoken about when you've done your natural hair treats, about like wanting your nose to be smaller than hair, but I never knew it was like as deep as wanting to be white. I didn't actually know that side.
I think these are things that with time, for me anyway, it's
good to hear.
Things that you forget about, because these are conversations you don't have with people. You don't generally just walk around and say, I used to want to be white. Do you know what I mean? You don't have these, and actually it's a little source of shame in a way as well.
But
because you get to for me get into like my teenage years, going to school. Now the environment was different. I'm around a lot more black kids. Now I'm finding my identity. Now I'm proud to be black. Now I'm gonna go and tell people, I used to want to be white. It's not that, do you know what I mean?
Of course.
But we're having a different conversation as adults, and it's exploring that. It's exploring those things, because actually these are all the things that shaped us.
And I think younger people that are watching this can benefit from, because you don't realise that other people feel like that. Like I wouldn't have known that you have had that experience as a black woman, because when I see black women, they seem to be, in my opinion, like my experience from when I was a child, they just don't like white people. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so like hearing, I'm not saying that obviously you, but you think, subhanAllah, so where does that all kind of come from? Because when I got out of primary school, like as I said, I was in the mixed environment, and then I went to, it was a school in like North London, and the black girls, they hated me. Like it was just not nice, and it was like I had a lot of attention from the boys. And again, for me, I was 12. I wasn't in that school long, but it was like I didn't understand. It was very overwhelming, because as I said, people will recognise me, and I'm not saying this to boost myself up but this is my experience. People would recognise me. I got a lot of attention and things like that, but I never saw myself as beautiful. And the black girls, man, they just really
they came for you.
They just came for me, man. It was a lot, and I kept running away from school and all of that, and eventually I moved to Essex, and then it's like a complete contrast, because I'm in a school with no black people. There was one black boy in the whole school, and just basically me and another mixed race girl joined later on. But I did get some racism, but it wasn't, I didn't get bullied, and I definitely didn't fit in. I definitely felt different, because they would say like jokes and things like that, like about Asian people, or just silly jokes, but they would always say, oh, is it all right if I said that? So it was always brought to my attention that I am not part of this. And again, I don't remember the thought process of wanting to be white, but I definitely unconsciously became very defensive and became, ready to fight and things like that, because I didn't feel like I was good enough. All those kind of feelings come to the surface, but you don't know what they are at that age, because you don't process your feelings and your low self-worth and your low self-esteem and your trauma at that age. You just want to be a part of something, and you either go, I guess, quiet and maybe get bullied, or you maybe become the bully, because you're like, flip, man, how am I gonna deal with this?
From my perspective, I'm not gonna speak for the whole of black people, right? But just from where I'm standing, from what I know of the black friends and family that I have, it is more to do with there's an unconscious bias. And that unconscious bias stems from the level of racism that black people have received personally and secondarily. When I say secondarily, I mean, observing the racist attacks, the killings, whatever. I'm not going to start going in, but you know what I mean? Over the years, all of the different things, civil rights movements, all of the different things compounded together. As a race, that generational trauma is embedded inside every black person I know. And that is what has impacted the way that we do interact with and view or perceive white people. Not even just white people. It's not actually isolated to white people because it applies to everyone who's not black. It applies to everyone who's not black, and I'm pretty sure that most black people in the comments would agree with what I'm saying in terms of the perception.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily how we feel about individual people.
It's just a general like blanket.
And it's there because of a defense mechanism. It's there as the defense mechanism. Because, all right, let's say for example, you know, you've been through certain situations and it's impacted you and you've had a certain result from it. You're not going to put yourself, it's like once bitten, twice shy. You're not going to put yourself in a situation where you allow yourself to be attacked or, you know, potentially at harm or at risk by this person because they might just, there's always that suspicion in your mind, but it is an unconscious bias and it's there because of that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But this is obviously not just from black people, because we see in the community we have racism from every single angle. So, you know, one group hates another group. You have, you know, a lot of Asian people, it's all about, you know, colorism and how light you are. And then you've got like the Asians and the Arabs. They've got major issues with one another, or the Asians within amongst themselves from different parts. And
even amongst white people though, because I was having a conversation, it's funny, I was having a conversation with my other friend Aysha the other day, and she was like, she was talking to a colleague and he's a white guy, and he was like, he said to her, what is this issue that Jamaicans have with Africans and Africans with Jamaicans? You know, there's so much of an issue between Africans and Jamaicans. And she was like, okay,
even Nigerians and Ghanaians, for crying out loud.
She was like, but I could say the same, ask you the same thing. What is the issue with English people and gypsies? And he just looked at her like, because this is the problem. But it's an unconscious bias that happens. But, you know, sometimes one issue between a set of people is highlighted more so than somewhere else.
I think when it comes to like, you know, travellers, gypsies, they live differently. They live
differently, but that doesn't mean they're different. But there is a definite. But
like, for example, with somebody that's Caribbean and white, they could live next door to each other.
Do you know what? It's funny that you said that,
because
that was exactly what she said to him. Yeah. And I didn't want to say it, but that's what she said to him. She said, if you live next door to a gypsy, to a traveller, sorry, I'm just using the words that she said. If you live next door to a traveller, how would you behave? How would you feel? And he was silent. He didn't respond. So that said enough. Because he was silent. He didn't say, oh, I'd be fine with it. I've got you know, traveller friends. He didn't say that. He actually stopped and thought about it, which kind of made the point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and the thing is interesting, I was speaking to a sister the other day, white sister, but she's got mixed race children. And she used to live like, well, anyway, she lives in Essex, and she said she was hanging her washing out one day and she heard like the neighbours like, oh, who's moving in next door? It's not none of them lot again, is it? And she's white, but her kids are mixed race. She says he normally smiles and he's friendly and all that kind of thing.
And it's those things that are there that black people are aware of. Most black people are aware that people will smile in your face and behind closed doors, they're saying something else.
So I don't know if, for me, because I've moved around a lot and I've been very much out of, like I said, I've gone from having identity issues to being very unbothered. And I think that's because you get to a point, you know, I live in an area that's not Muslim populated, and I'm very comfortable, alhamdulillah, I'm about it, in my identity now. I mean, it's taken a while to kind of get used to the covering up and the change of lifestyle, but as a Muslim, whereas a lot of people I know, if they come into my area, they're a bit like, this is a little bit, gosh, there's no Muslims, there's no black people, there's no, you know, there is, but it's you know, it's populated with white people. And other people might, you know, feel uncomfortable, like, oh, they're staring, or they're this, or they're that. I've got more of an attitude of like, I'm not really too bothered. Yeah. But it's taken me a long time to get there, but I can understand it being like that, because I've been like that myself. Like I said, I felt like in school, I had to be defensive. Yeah. I had to put up a certain persona so that people didn't think that they could you know, bully me because I'm a different colour to them. So I do get that. I do understand where that comes from. It like that defence mechanism that you feel that you have to have just in case, you know, they have a problem with me or they treat me differently because I'm black. So you've said that you kind of grew up, you had those feelings around wanting to be white, wanting your nose to be smaller, not really feeling like you fit in, but then you went to secondary school and that all kind of changed. Obviously now you're doing a lot about self-worth, self-love and natural hair and all that kind of thing. When did it become that you became, or have you got to that point now where you feel like your identity is clear? Like you mentioned straight away, it was like mother, woman, black woman, Muslim, like it was quick, like it was very...
My identity is clear, and I think because of being Muslim, I think becoming Muslim was where I began to shape and solidify what my identity was, who I am. But coming back to the point of what you were saying before about not being bothered, you know, being unbothered about race so much because you're secure in who you are. I don't think I've got to that point where I can't be bothered about race. In general, identity, full stop. And I think it is because of the part of my identity of being a mother that keeps that thingy. For myself, I'm unbothered. I can go anywhere and be, you know, alhamdulillah, I'm secure in who I am. I'm gonna turn up in a jilbab because I'm Muslim, or my abaya, or, you know, I'm gonna turn up looking visibly Muslim, saying alhamdulillah, subhanallah, inshallah, all these things. Take my prayer mat out if I need to pray and do what I need to do. You know, and I'm a woman, so I'm not gonna be here. I'm gonna be, you know, acting appropriately as a female, and I'm black, so I'm not gonna be scared to be black, if that makes sense. But as a mother, there's only a certain point where I can forget about it, because I now always have to think about my children and how they show up in the world. So that means I have to be conscious of both sides of it. I can't be, so there's this element of being pro-black, which is, I'm not like gonna say don't be pro-black, but I feel like there's a certain amount of pro-blackness that borders on being racist. And that for me, I don't support, because I'm here for the struggle. I'm involved, I can't leave. Do you know what I mean? I'm here for raising the issues, but I can't teach, like I can teach my children black history and I can teach my children to be proud of themselves, but there's a point where I need to make sure I teach my children to accept that there are other people with other races and respect those people as well. And it doesn't mean that you have to lose yourself as a black person to do that. Do you get what I mean?
The balance is...
there has to be a balance.
Very important.
There has to be a balance. But also I have to really make sure my children understand that, yes, as a black person, unfortunately in this world, you, especially for my son, you have to be careful how you move. You have to be careful how you move, and you have to do certain things so that you can get ahead. You have to work that extra hard. It just is what it is.
I think Nojahan mentioned when she was talking about like being in the sector that she's in, she's Asian, and she was saying, you know, I've got lots of components that go against me technically when I'm in certain environments. So I hear what you're saying, because it's not the same for somebody that's white or even lighter skinned to walk outside for London, for example, as it is for a black boy to walk outside.
Is a real thing.
And I feel like, for me, sometimes I find it a bit difficult, because in terms of, my mum is white and my dad is black, like, and this is where people sometimes they want to put you into their kind of boxes. like, oh, you're black. No, I identify as mixed race or mixed heritage because my mum is white and my dad, rahmatullah, was black. So you can't just negate like your parents, your upbringing. I've got, family, Jamaican family, English family, and I do find difficulty in racism because I've been brought up, as I said, I didn't know about race until I got to a certain age, and that was more based off of my own perception of my family and my, that complication there. But I've always been brought up extremely liberal and very much like you accept everyone, whether they're, whatever they choose to do in life, as long as they're kind of law abiding and so on and so forth. Everybody is treated equally, and that was my mum. My mum was very pro, like you said, people pro-black. My mum's non-discrimination, non-prejudiced, non-racist, and you cannot say, my mum will go harder than certain black people for racism. Like, she is very, very against it. So for me, may Allah guide her.
Ameen.
I find it very difficult when I see it from either side. Can I ask you a question? Because this is something that I'm curious to know, because as I said, I don't identify as white and I don't identify as black. And like I said, I've been brought up quite sheltered in some ways and quite open. So when I see things, I can sometimes feel angry for the sake of one race or the other, even when it comes to like injustice with the Muslim.
So
I can jump from one to the next quite a lot easier. But I notice, like you said, when it comes to being black, fully black, whatever colour, the connection
it's different.
And I it's not that I don't understand it, but I don't have the same level of connection because I am not black, if you understand what I'm saying. Because when you're mixed, some mixed race people do, but again, it depends on your upbringing. Is it like your upbringing? Is it like, what is it that makes it more than it would be if it was someone of a different colour? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Because that's representation.
See, for me,
because
if that was...
we talk about positive representation.
Yeah.
And why do we talk about positive representation? Because we need to see people with our identity more. We need to see, black Muslim women. Let's just say that. Yeah. We talk about representation, and we talk about that because we know that positive representation is going to have a positive effect. Same way that the negative representation has a negative effect.
Yeah.
Because when I see that positive representation of somebody who's black, female, and Muslim, I see myself.
Right. Okay.
But same way when the negative representation, I see myself, or I see my son, or I see my brother, or I see my mum. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why.
Yeah.
But same way, if I see injustice anywhere, it upsets me. Ask my children. I will cry at these things. I'm not trying to like win points or nothing, but I'm just saying. But I get just as emotional when I see injustice happening in Syria.
But a lot of other people do. But I'm saying, like, if someone's, for example, like pro-black, like that kind of it just is, and it's not just black people that have these things. I've seen it in other communities, like definitely. If there's a flood in Pakistan, we're just gonna, what about Syria? What about Palestine? What is it that, like, I can't.
Yeah, you're right.
Do you get what I mean?
You're right, and this is why I said I cannot associate myself with that pro-blackness that borders on racism.
Yeah.
Because I've seen them comments too. We'll be commenting on an injustice that's happened in Syria, that's happened in Gaza, and we're here as black Muslims in the comments, and somebody's talking about but why don't you talk about Uganda, or why don't you talk about what's happening in the Congo? And nobody's not talking about that, but right now this post right here is about this.
What is it? The what about?
The what about? It doesn't mean that just because I'm black I can't recognize another human suffering.
Yeah.
And what is that?
That's what I was asking you. What is that? Is that just because
I can't tell you what that is, because I don't have that kind of mentality, and me myself, I struggle to understand it. So I can't tell you what that is. That for me is not what we're doing. Basically, it's not what I'm trying to do, and it's not what I'm trying to teach my children. The end.
Because like moving away from like specifically black, culturally, subhanallah, we have a lot of Muslims in the community that you're not marrying outside of not even just
black or whatever.
Not even just our specific race, but our specific tribe or town or city or this or that. And it's difficult for me again to understand why. Like what is it about? But that, you know, obviously is a bit borders on kind of nationalism and colorism. And all those kind of things. But it's the same principles behind it. Coming from the same sickness,
Stay with your own.
Yeah.
It's the same principles behind it. Stick to your own. Stay with your own. And it's like, but Allah's made us from different tribes and languages. Allah's told us this in the Quran so that we can know one another.
Yeah. And
that's not just you know, isolated to sitting down and having conversations in the masjid. That's you know, bringing families together. That's marrying within each other. That's just, it's all part of it.
I can to a certain degree I can kind of understand the difficulties when you know if there's like a strong culture, language, traditions, and all those kind of things. And I know it can be encouraged, like marry within, you know, if they're practicing, if it's, you know, going to be, because it may be easier in some sense, but then, like I said, when it's kind of almost, it becomes silly now, like, okay, we have to be part of, that's not even about culture, because you've got the same culture, you've got the same traditions, you know, you're just from a different tribe or a different part of the country. So now we're feeding into a sickness that is then feeding into this whole idea that we're better than you. And I think this is what hurts me a lot when I see the racism and when I see people talking about other races. There's some betterment going on, like we think we're better or we dislike you, and
that self-righteous indignation. You think you're above someone else because of your stature or because of your race or because of whatever else. But when you're mixed race, man, it's such a weird one, because you can't get there. You just can't. I mean, you can. People probably do, but I think, how do you get there? How do you get there when your mum or your dad is white or black? Like, how do you get to that kind of looking down on? And I think if you are there, there's a problem, because they're your parents. And the respect and the kind of love that you know that you have to develop, whether it's for the sake of Allah or whether it's just, you know, it's like, how do you get to hate in a part of yourself? That's interesting. What do you think we can like do individually? Like, I don't know, but what I do think is this is a wider conversation that we need to have with more people so that we can find those solutions. Because actually talking about the issue in this manner is the only way that we're going to really come to those solutions. So yes, we invite you in the comments to come and join in with the conversation. Share your opinions on this topic, and maybe inshallah we'll have another. Yeah, we need a panel. Maybe we need a panel. But like, do that. Just before we wrap up, couple of things that we can individually do, because I feel like we've opened the conversation. Let's leave the conversation on a note of, let's get proactive, because I strongly believe, I know this is I can be a little bit, you know, I can be a little bit loody-lally, or whatever you want to call it, and a bit like, oh yeah, which I've been brought up a little bit with this kind of, let's all just hold hands, and, you know, but on a serious level, I do feel that we can do better. Yeah, we can do better. We individually, we can get together and talk about these conversations. I wanted to ask you, you know, when you said to me the other day,
you said, when you look at me, you said something along the lines of, when you look at me, you can't help but see that I'm mixed race and I've got lighter skin, and that would give me like a certain
a little heads up,
like a little step ahead kind of thing. And I was really like, that took me a few days to digest, because I've never ever, and I find it very courageous and very like, it's something that I never would think anyone would say, because you feel a lot as a mixed race person from both sides, right? And sometimes you might not understand it, and when you're younger, people don't know how to articulate, like maybe they feel that, you know, you might get ahead and they can't because of the skin colour, and if you're not aware of it, it can make you not like that person. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you could not like me because of that, but you're aware of it, and we're older and we're friends and so on and so forth. So I'm glad you felt comfortable to say that, but it took me a couple of days to process, and I was like, subhanallah, that is...
And I think that's because me, for myself, I recognise what that does to me. It's not any way, shape or form about you.
Yeah.
Because what that is a lack of self-confidence. Because that's what that does. Okay, so basically the breakdown is this. If I know, like I have known, that you or anyone else who is lighter or whiter than me is going to get ahead quicker, every single situation or opportunity that comes along, if there's somebody else next to me who is of a lighter or whiter shade, I'm going to naturally assume that they're most probably going to get it before I do. And now that becomes about me telling myself, it becomes about self-belief, and it becomes about me telling myself, no, I'm just as good, and I can get the opportunity. And actually, if it doesn't come to me, it wasn't written for me. That's where my Islam kicks in. That's where the different mindset kicks in as a Muslim. Do you get what I mean? So it's constantly evaluating it, because it's a subconscious thought. It's not a conscious, it's not something that's conscious, but I can tell you about it because I've analysed it for myself. And I don't have to have a feeling of jealousy or hate towards you, because it's not about you.
It's not about...
It's about what I've been facing for the whole of my life as a black woman. Do you get what I mean? And what I also have to teach my children on a day-to-day basis about themselves and their identity. So that's what that is. And I get that it took you a couple of days to process it, because it took me longer than that to process it, to understand it in the first place. Do you get what I mean? So
but I think that is the key. It is, we have to be self-aware, and we have to understand our religion, because how can you justify going in front of Allah with a hatred towards another Muslim because they're a different colour or a different tribe or a different... for me, it's disgusting. Like, wallahi, it's foul. Like, and it's like you're in the masjid praying, or you're focusing on your worshipping of Allah, but in your heart you're blocking your worship.
It's funny that you even mentioned that, being in the masjid praying, because see, this is what I mean. It's things like being in the masjid, and I might be standing next to somebody who's non-black, and they don't want to put their feet next to each other. They don't even want to come shoulder to shoulder. They're literally standing there, but we're supposed to be in lines.
But then
it could be could be about anything. But what I'm processing first of all, is it because I'm black? Do you get what I mean? And now I have to talk to myself. It's not necessarily because I'm black. Maybe it's because culturally that's what they do. You know, their madhab says that. You know, so I have to talk to myself, because subconsciously that other thought came first, and now I have to no.
It's not that.
I don't have no evidence.
I
don't have no dalil for that.
But that was something else that I was like, wow, because sometimes I do think I'm Muslim, like I'm more aware of being a Muslim in whatever space I'm in, especially in Essex. There's some days or some areas or some particular times of day, if there's a lot of people, where I'm like, I'm the only Muslim here. Like, something kicks in and then it might fade away. So I guess it's similar in that you know that you're different, or you know that you're of the colour that you are and everybody else isn't, straight away that there may, if something happens like out of the ordinary, you're going to think, and then you've got to go back to that process of, with the same with me, I might have to say, oh no, it's fine, Aysha, you know, chill out, calm down, whatever.
Yeah.
If I'm the only Muslim and there's like white people, or like, you know, anyone that's like, could be anywhere, it could be black people, because I've actually had a couple of older black men shouting and swearing at me, and I go back to wherever, and I'm like,
because they assume that you're not mixed race, and they look at you and somehow see Asian.
Yeah, so probably.
Yeah.
So that's more than I've had, you know, amongst. But yeah, so I kind of get that. But I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of identity building that we all need to do, because, again, like I said, going from a young girl that wanted to be white, that hated herself, you know, whether it was to do with my colour, whether it was to do with my weight, whether it was to do with not liking the person I am, and really not feeling any sort of type of worth, where I just harmed myself in different ways, to then, you know, spending years in therapy and understanding myself and building that self-awareness, to get into a point where I still have days where I'm like, I'm just not feeling, or I don't feel as confident, or I feel a bit uncomfortable outside. And it's still there, but again, it's like at a point where it's like, well, actually now I can identify, alhamdulillah, as a, you know, Muslim, mixed race Muslim woman, or Muslim woman of mixed race heritage, whatever, and I feel content about it. Do you know what I mean? And that's taken a long time, but I think that's where a lot of the hatred and things like that stem from all different colours and tribes and backgrounds. There's got to be something in your heart, there's got to be something in your mind that needs healing, my friend.
100%. And I think that is the reality, that at some point every individual has to come to and start to unpack that. Because for me, I know that my journey hasn't necessarily even been, you know, so much about race, or so much about being Muslim. Actually, a lot of it for me has been about just myself, and actually the aspect of being a woman, and how I show up in the world as a woman, how I show up with my femininity, how I can change certain aspects about how I communicate, and how I operate in different relationships as a woman. Because what did, you know, being a woman mean to me for such a long time? It meant being independent. It meant being strong and having this strong trophy. And I'm not saying don't be strong, but I do think there's a difference between using the word resilient and using the word strong. And I think resilience is actually more so what we should talk about. But actually then the opposite of resilience is vulnerability, and you can't have one without the other. Like, you have to be able to be vulnerable with yourself, more than anything, so that you can be vulnerable with other people. And you have to be resilient with yourself, be disciplined with yourself, so that you can be resilient and disciplined with other people, setting boundaries, you know, putting those things in place that are there to protect who you are, and who you have, you know, come to discover and identify yourself as. So I think that's a good place to end. But how do you identify yourself? Jump in the comments and tell us, inshallah. Let us know down below. Yes, and do not forget to like, comment and subscribe. And inshallah, we will see you back here on the channel with another episode soon. Assalamu alaikum.
That's all from us on another episode of Sister to Sister. We really appreciate all of the love. all of your messages and feedback. But until next time, be kind, as you never know what battle someone is facing.